I spend a lot of time interviewing other people, and I just realized that I haven't really shared my own story with you. So I decided to go through the list of questions that I usually ask other people and give you my answers for a change, and let you know a little bit about my experiences. So the first question I usually ask people is to tell me a little bit about themselves. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I am from South Africa. I was a single mum for many years. And I've now been in the TEFL industry for almost a decade, having worked at home in South Africa, but also in China for the bulk of my time. Also in Thailand for a short stint, and then a couple of years in Vietnam. I have been a teacher. I've continued to teach throughout all the years because that's what I love to do and that's what I'm really passionate about. But I've also been, oh my word, I've been a foreign teacher manager, I've been teacher trainer, I've been regional support officer, location manager, regional director, and also national director was the last job I had in Vietnam. So I have been in the industry for many years. I'm passionate about the industry. I'm passionate about students. I'm passionate about making a difference in the world. And for me, TEFL has been a dream come true. The second question I usually ask is, what was your motivation to become a TEFL teacher? As a single mum, travel wasn't really an option for me for many years. And it was only in my late 20s, early 30s that I traveled internationally for the first time. And I went to India and Nepal. And it was just the most incredible experience. It was a life-changing experience. I returned after 3 weeks and I was a completely different person. I went back again that same year for another month, and I just knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life traveling. And that was something that I held in my mind ever since then, that was what I wanted to do. And obviously I had to bring my daughter up to adulthood, and we did that successfully, and that was an incredible journey on its own. But then I reached a time where travel was an option for me, and a life of travel was an option for me. And that's when I was actually in the most terrible job in the world, the most boring job in the world, when I was retrenched. And I knew in that moment that I was retrenched that this was my opportunity, that this was, in fact, the first day of the rest of my life. And I could just see it for the potential and the opportunities that lay before me. And and that was when I used part of the retrenchment money to do my TEFL course, and so began the first day of the rest of my life. And every day has been a phenomenal, incredible adventure since then. So my next question is usually, how did you find the transition into the first country that you lived and worked in, and how did you adapt culturally and being so far from home? Well, the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do in my entire life was to walk away from my daughter at the airport and step onto a plane and not know when I was going to see her again. I cannot tell you how difficult that is. And every time I've returned home, it's exactly the same. Walking away, it is so hard. But leaving the people that you love and the life you know is the sacrifice that you make for living the life that I do. The first place that I lived was the capital city of Inner Mongolia in China, called Hohhot. I'll just say the English version. It's easier. It was crazy. It was so different to everything that I ever experienced in my life. And I remember flying into China. I actually flew into Beijing first. And I remember looking as we were flying in at all the buildings and the writing on the buildings. And I'm a reader. I read everything. And there was absolutely nothing that I could see for as far as I could see. No letters, no words that were actually recognizable. And I think in that moment, I thought, what the hell have I done? Am I absolutely crazy to do this? I'm going into a country where people don't even speak the same language as me. What was I thinking? And there was definitely a moment of incredible panic in that moment. I'm glad to say I did get over it. Arriving in Ho Hot, I arrived literally as the first snow fell. And I'm from Cape Town. We maybe have snow on the mountains once or twice during the winter. And the coldest that it got during my time in Ho Hot was minus 35 degrees. So it was a tad chilly for a South African Cape Townian. And that took a bit of getting used to, especially arriving right into the coldness of it. And life is so different when it's cold. Everything is different. So that was something that I needed to get used to. And I think the biggest challenge that I faced was being so conspicuous. Every time I left my apartment, every time I walked out, whether it was into the streets, into the shop, into the school I worked at, being one of very, very few foreigners, everybody, every single person in the vicinity would turn around and stare at me. And I found that very, very difficult in the beginning, because it's China. There are, anytime you outside, there are literally hundreds of people around you, and they're all looking at you. They're all waiting to see what you'll do. They're talking about you. They're taking photos of you. And it really can be a little intimidating. Not so bad in the bigger cities, but I was in a really, really remote location, so it was really intense. That was hard, and to be honest, there were moments where I would go outside and literally just want to growl at the people and give them something to look at, something serious to look at. I obviously didn't do that, although the temptation was great. But I did overcome that by connecting with people, connecting first of all with the old people who were very accepting, very intrigued. But if you smiled and waved, you got the biggest smile and wave in return. And literally every time they saw you after that, they would greet you like an old friend. So they were great. And then the other people that I connected with were kids. So whenever I would see a child, I would wave at them and smile at them. They would react back to me. And I pretty much ignored all the rest of the people. Once I started interacting with a child, sometimes the mother would come and try and talk to me, which was very limited, or no Chinese at that stage, or Mandarin at that time when I first arrived. And that was a bit difficult. But I realized that just smiling makes all the difference. Smiling and acknowledging other people. And as soon as I started doing that, and instead of being afraid to leave my apartment and afraid to be in public, I started interacting with them. And even though we didn't have a language in common, smiling is a universal language. And when I started connecting with people in that way, that's when I really started to overcome being in a different country and being so conspicuous all the time. So my next question is usually, what was the biggest challenge that you faced as a new teacher, and how did you overcome it? I really fell into teaching as if it was something I'd been doing all my life. Surprisingly, because I'm actually quite a shy person, and I suffered from social anxiety growing up and into my early adult life. And so I didn't know if this was something that I would actually be able to do. But I think my own personal experiences created an empathy in me that resonates with being a teacher. And I seem to relate to and understand children in a way that I don't really understand, but I do. I have a connection with children. I also have a connection with animals. I think I'm just, as I say, really empathetic in that way. And it was like I just knew what they needed, what they wanted. I was able to fulfill my role really well right from the beginning. So it wasn't a huge challenge for me to become a teacher. But I think the biggest challenge that I faced as a new teacher was rushing through my lessons too fast to try and make sure that I fitted everything in. And then finding myself with an extra 10 or 15 minutes still to go, and I'd finished everything and had nothing planned. And that is, oh my word, it's a terrible feeling when you get there and you look at the time and you realize you still have all this time on your hands, you've got nothing, and these children are looking at you waiting for the next thing to do. So the way that I overcame that was to prepare extra games. I would always have 3 or 4 extra games that would work in any lesson and with any age group. And I wouldn't play these games at any other time in the beginning. They were my support and my backup games. So then I'd go in with those games in mind, and if I did find that the time, I had extra time at the end of the lesson, then I would use those games. But that didn't last very long. As a teacher, you very quickly get a feel for a lesson. You know where you are, what the time is, where you should be, and it just is something that happens automatically over time. I think the other way that that helped me was to, if I was teaching an hour class, I would break it up into quarters. So the first 15 minutes, I would be doing this. 15 minutes after, that, I would do something different. And then anytime I looked at the clock, I would see, okay, I'm going over time a little bit, or I'm a little bit, running ahead. Then I only had a little bit of time that I'd have to worry about to make up that last 15 minutes or the last few moments of that 15 minutes, as opposed to being stuck at the end of a lesson with a full, a large amount of time left over. So those were the 2 ways that I overcame that. But again, with experience, these are things that disappear very quickly, or problems that disappear very quickly. But it is something that you should be prepared for as a new teacher. So the next question is, what is the most rewarding experience you've had as a teacher? And I'm just starting to realize how impossible it is to answer that question, because there are so many rewarding experiences. But if I have to tell you about one, it would have to be Oscar. So Oscar was a boy I taught in public school in Wuhan, and that was before Wuhan became a household name. And Oscar was a little bit different to his classmates in that he came from a different social structure and financial class as well. And he was also a little introverted, a very intelligent boy, but he didn't talk very much. And he loved to read. So he could always be found sprawled somewhere where everyone was trying to walk, with a book, and absolutely oblivious to the rest of the world around him. But because he was a little different, he had trouble with bullying. And on my very first day in that school, somehow I met up with him. His English was quite good, and he came up to talk to me, and he and I ended up walking into the classroom together. And immediately a group of the boys came up to me and said, "Teacher, you mustn't walk with Oscar. You mustn't talk to him because he's stupid." And I said to him, to these kids, I said, "Well, that's a really mean thing to say. Why would you say something like that?" And they were like, yes, teacher, but it's true because our class teacher says it. And that just, sometimes teachers can be so cruel as well. But anyway, I empathize with Oscars a lot because as the strange, quiet kid at school, bullying was something that I experienced quite dramatically as well. And so I kept an eye on him, and I had a really special place for him. But the one day I walked into the classroom, and the same group of boys had made a circle around Oscar, and the ringleader had his suitcase, and he was shaking it upside down, and all Oscar's things were falling out, and Oscar was in a state. And as I came in to ask what was going on, and so the boy kind of triumphantly pulls up one of the school books that Oscar was always reading and said, "Oscar is a thief. He's been stealing school books." And I could just see on Oscar's face that this is what the thing that he'd been dreading his entire life. And I knew, I had no doubt that he was taking books home and reading them, because as a book devourer myself, I can't leave a book half finished. And I would probably have done the exact same thing. But I also knew without a doubt that he would always bring them back. So to try and diffuse the situation, I kind of played it down, saying, I said to Oscar, "Did you take the book?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "And when you take books home, do you always bring them back?" And he said, "Yes." And I turned to the boys and I said, "See, he always brings them back. Oscar's exactly the same as me. I also used to take books home, but because I love books so much, I will always bring them back. And I can see that Oscar's the same. So come on, guys, get over," and I kind of diffused the situation. But it bothered me so much. And then there was a weekend in between, and the following Monday, I went into the class and I canceled the lesson. I said to them, "That's it. I'm not going to be doing the lesson today. Instead, I want to do something different. And I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to tell you my story." And I did. And my story was quite tragic as a child. But the whole point of it was to explain to them how I'd felt as somebody who had been bullied as a child. And because I had, as a teacher, connected with these kids, even those kids who were the bullies, I'd created I'd made a point of creating a strong bond with them, because I knew at some point I did want to broach the subject with them. And that day I told them my story, and I told them what it felt like to be that child, to be that person. And especially that ringleader, I could see as I was talking that he was getting very defensive for me. He very protective, and he was getting angry, and so I definitely played it up, and I built them up with that. And then at the end, I said to them, and guys, I'm very, very sad, because I see that there are children in this class doing the same thing to other kids in this class as what happened to me. And I managed to kind of turn it all around, and without saying Oscar's name, everybody knew who I was talking about, but I wouldn't say it because he was shy. And I managed to bring it around to them and show these kids who were bullying Oscar what they had been doing and how unfair it was. And I must say it's now about 7 years later, and I'm still in touch with Oscar. I'm still in touch with his mum, and that was the last day that he was ever bullied. So I suppose for me that was probably the most rewarding experience. But that was only just one example of many similar and also completely different experiences that were just as rewarding. So that's what teaching is all about. It is a rewarding experience. My next question. What classroom management technique works best for you? So I tried many different classroom management techniques, and there are so many good and different techniques out there. But ultimately, I created a technique that works for me, and I think that's what teaching is all about. It's finding your own teaching style and what works for you. I think having been a mum made it a little easier for me to understand what kids need in the form of management. And so it wasn't that difficult for me. What I did find was that it's imperative to go into a classroom the very first time and be absolutely strict. You can always ease up on the strictness later, but if you go in being too easy and they realize that, it's really, really hard to get them back. So I do the exact same routine in every single class that I go into the first time that I walk in. If I do not do this, I can be guaranteed that I will have trouble with that class. So usually I will walk into the class. I will not acknowledge anybody. I will just walk in. You know, if somebody greets me, I'll kind of nod in their direction. And this is anything, say, from about grade 1 and up. Kindergarten kids or very young kids, you would not relate to them in the same way. But school-going kids, you can. I found this to be the best. So I will walk in, ignore them, put my bags down. If anybody greets me, I won't be rude, of course, but kind of nod in their direction. And then I walk to the front center of the classroom and I stand. I just stand. I don't say a thing. I look at the kids, those kids who are making a noise and, haven't quieted down. I kind of stare at them a little bit more blatantly. I might fold my arms and show a little irritation. And I literally will not say a word until every single child in that class is absolutely quiet and looking at me. And once they're absolutely quiet and looking at me, I will hold that silence for a little bit longer and just look again, take a little bit of a longer, like, I see you kind of look at those kids who took the longest to give me their attention, just so that they know I know. Then in my most serious and strict voice, I tell them, I have one rule in my class. If I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, by the time we get to 1, you are all quiet and looking at me. Do you understand? And then I go from that moment, from being strict and being a little intimidating as a teacher, to being the most fun teacher in the world. And I have a game that I play every time. It's an introductory game where kids get to ask me questions. It's really interactive, so the kids love it. They get quite worked up and noisy. It's basically, I call it the stop-go game, where they take a pencil case and they pass it between themselves. And when I say stop, whoever's got the pencil case must ask me a question. And I build it up, and the kids really love it. But it's a fast-paced game. They get really into it, and they will very quickly become noisy. And as soon as they become noisy, I become strict teacher again. And I literally 5, 4, 3, 2. And I've never actually gotten down to 1. So I'm not quite sure what would happen if I did. But then I am absolutely immediately, and I think that's the thing, is you have to be consistent. If you're consistent in your very first lesson, the rest of your teaching experience will be a breeze. And all I need to do at any given stage and in any single one of the hundreds of classes that I've taught is stand in the middle center of the class, fold my arms and be quiet. And within seconds, I have a dead quiet class, all giving me their attention. And that's what works for me. But what I would say, without doubt, whatever you do, go in strict first. It might seem a little bit mean, but you need to do it. If you don't do it, if you don't show the students that side of you, you will never ever get, you'll never ever properly manage your class. And the other thing is consistency. Don't let them get away. In that first day, you want to be the cool teacher, but you also really need to use this opportunity, because it's the only time you will have that chance to meet them for the first time. Consistent. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And that goes for good things or bad things. If you say you're going to do something fun with the kids and you don't do it, those kids will end up resenting you. But if you tell them you're going to punish them in a certain way, you're going to take off points, or you're going to keep them in for an extra few minutes, the minute you don't follow through with that, you've lost those kids. So those would be my two biggest things. And I'll tell you for free as well that shouting never helps. If you can get your kids the way that I do into following silence, it's much more powerful than what you could ever hope to get from your kids if you scream and shout at them. My second last question would be, what is your go-to game or activity that never fails you? And I think an important game in the TEFL industry that every teacher needs to know and will use repeatedly through almost every single lesson is rock, paper, scissors. It is the deciding factor in a TEFL classroom. So any disagreements, say about points or any very close calls or anything like that, if you're playing, for example, musical chairs and two kids sit in the chair at the same time, rock, paper, scissors, whoever wins that gets to stay, whoever loses leaves. And that game is your deciding factor within other games. So that is a really, really important one to know. Students will always agree to it. So if rock, paper, scissors says that you're the winner, then you're the winner. If it says you're the loser, then you're the loser. And children will always accept that. So I would say for games and activities, flashcards. If you have flashcards, you have 10,000 different games that you can play. And there are just so many great ones to choose from. For example, if you've introduced new target language, new words, you can play hide and seek where, well, you know how that goes. One kid stands in the corner, another student hides the card, and then the class has to repeat the word. So if the flashcard that we're learning that day or the word that we're learning that day is cat, if the student is far away from the flashcard, we'll all go very softly, cat, cat, cat. But as they get closer and closer, we get louder and louder and louder until literally I have the entire class screaming at the top of their lungs. And I can do that because I know that all I need to do is fold my arms in the center of the classroom. They'll all be dead quiet again. So when you have that ability to get your kids to do what you need them to do, you can allow them to be noisy. You can have absolute pandemonium in the class and then bring it down to calm and collected within a split second. And so that's what I really like, where my kids can get noisy, where they can get out of their seats. So flashcards. What I would say, especially when you're dealing with younger kids, make sure that you're playing games that involve everybody. It doesn't help if you have, for younger kids, they all want to be involved. If you have a game that you're only working with one or two kids, it means the rest of your class is doing nothing. And that's when craziness happens. So always make sure that for little kids that they're all involved in the game. And for older kids that at the very least, it's interesting for them to watch and fascinating for them to watch. And just make sure that all of your games always have an educational purpose. You're not playing games just for the sake of having fun in the class. You're playing games so that they can learn something. And that's a really important thing. And then my final question is always, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a new teacher? And I think it's important that new teachers understand that this is not the easiest thing in the world to do. Leaving everything you've ever known before, leaving the people you love, traveling to the other side of the world where everything is different. The language, potentially the alphabet, the customs, the weather, the experiences. There is an adjustment period. I would say a good period to give yourself is 3 months. It takes time to build routines, to get used to what the school needs from you. It takes time to find yourself as a teacher and learn your own teaching style. Be gentle on yourself, be patient. And I think what I really want to say is, don't just turn around at the first bout of homesickness or the first challenge that you face or the first time it's a little difficult. It's not difficult for very long. It's actually quite phenomenal how quickly you do, in fact, create your own personal routines. Walking this, finding the way home that you like to walk, greeting the same faces that you see every day. And, very quickly you actually realize just one day, like, wow, I'm actually just doing this. I'm just living my life. I have routines. I have things that I do every day. And so the strange becomes normal. But it will be strange in the beginning. It will take getting used to. I think I've just seen too many teachers who arrive and just are so intimidated by the whole experience that they don't give themselves a chance. They just turn around and run back home, and that is sad. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. But I think, as I said, it's important to realize that it's not an easy situation. If you're expecting easy, if that's what you want out of life, then this maybe isn't the right thing for you. But if you are prepared to give yourself the time and put in the effort to get to know your situation, you will have the most incredible experience and rewards from that. So yeah, I would definitely advise new teachers just to give yourself a bit of time and be patient with yourselves.